Welcome back to this series of conversations at the Dark Reading News Desk at RSA. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Jim Dolce, Chairman and CEO of Lookout. Jim, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
We are talking about digital transformation and cloud security. Moving enterprise data and applications to the cloud, of course, is a key piece of digital transformation. COVID forced a lot of hands where this migration was concerned. Some of it was done in a rush. That left a lot of data exposed in some cases. What are some of the common remediation issues that you're seeing where data was inadvertently exposed?
Sure. Well, you're right that COVID has sort of rushed the move towards the cloud. There are some analysts who say that perhaps we've advanced by as much as 5 years as a result of the COVID pandemic.
Wow.
Now all of this data has been moved into cloud, whether it's a cloud service that's offered as a service, a SaaS service like a Box or a Dropbox or a OneDrive from Microsoft, or perhaps even if it's a typical S3 bucket from AWS. So the question is, I think, what are some of the risks of moving data so fast up into the cloud as we look back at these changes? There was a very recent breach of an airline, a large airlines, which was the result of certain controls in an AWS S3 bucket being left exposed, or controls exposing data to the public. And in fact, that's one of the primary causes of some of these large breaches, is that certain controls, these complex controls, when you bring data into the cloud, are difficult to manage, oftentimes leave data exposed to the public. There are technologies, particularly technologies that are part of the SSE portfolio of technologies. Cloud Security Posture Management, or CSPM, is one of these technologies, basically, which monitors all of the controls. Look at them as knobs and buttons, if you would, on these S3 buckets,
sure,
to make sure that the knobs and the buttons are all set so that data isn't exposed to the public. And if it becomes inadvertently exposed, it can change the knobs and buttons to make sure that they aren't effectively exposed over the long term.
Well, you mentioned SSE, a term that's officially entered the lexicon as a Secure Service Edge. For viewers who are new to this idea or this acronym, tell us a bit more about it and how it works.
Sure. I do think our industry has way too many acronyms. And SSE is yet another acronym that
Sure.
was born just in the past year or so. It comes out of Gartner, who recently put out a new Magic Quadrant for SSE technology. But what it really is a consolidation of technologies that have emerged over the past several years. So it is a consolidation of Cloud Access Service Brokers, or CASB, Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA, and Secure Web Gateways, or what we refer to as SWG. With the added options of data loss prevention and UEBA, which is user and entity behavioral analysis. So it is consolidation of technologies that really belong together into one new category called SSE. Now, these technologies, why do they belong together? Because I like to refer to it in sort of a day in the life of a typical user, particularly a remote user. You wake up in the morning, you go down to your home office, you get on your laptop, and you may be accessing a software as a service, for instance, your email, Office 365 or Gmail. You may go to Salesforce, salesforce.com, Workday, whatever it may be. That's accessing SaaS services. You also may access, for instance, corporate enterprise applications that are sitting behind a firewall. You do so through ZTNA, and you may be accessing just the global internet and a global website, which you do so through a Secure Web Gateway. So when you consider a day in the life, you're accessing data and applications, whether it be SaaS, enterprise applications, or just the global internet, and each of those requires a different component: CASB, ZTNA, Secure Web Gateway. It's natural then that they all fit together and they all belong together under this new acronym SSE.
Sure, but correct me if I'm wrong, these functions are more powerful when combined than if they are standalone, correct? I mean, this is what gives the boost to the security posture, right?
Well, it is necessary to cover all access in applications. CASB, ZTNA, and SWIG do so. What the power of bringing them together under a single entity is you can set policies for protecting data, and a single policy then applies across all three access technologies, right? So I like to refer to it as CASB, ZTNA, and Secure Web Gateway are the plumbing, and it connects us to various different things, and then the policies that lay on top of the plumbing are what monitors the traffic. And if you can set one set of policies independent of where the plumbing is taking you, it makes for a much easier operations problem.
Okay. So you referenced the Gartner research just a minute ago. Their prediction was that by 2025, 80% of organizations that are procuring SSE-related security services will buy a consolidated solution rather than the standalone functions that we've been talking about: secure web gateways, cloud access security brokers, zero trust offering. This is up 15% from just last year. I'm curious what you make of their prediction.
Oh, it certainly is going to come true here. When I talk to CISOs, one of the biggest problems that they have is they have too many security products, and they don't have enough personnel to manage all of the security products that they have. So the notion of bringing what used to be separate components together under a single portal, a single pane of glass, and a common set of policies across them adds simplicity, takes away their complexity, and is certainly one of the most attractive things to a CISO is consolidating technologies to make the daily operations simpler.
You also referenced data loss prevention and user entity behavior analytics. Curious how those capabilities will play in this market. Do you foresee that these features will be primary or front and center in users' buying going forward?
Absolutely. In fact, I was very glad to see that Gartner made those technologies part of the SSE requirements and definition. And the reason, very simply, is it is one thing to make connections. It is another thing to protect the data that's flowing over those connections. And frankly, the primary responsibility of an IT organization is data protection, to protecting the critical and sensitive data of the organization. That's what DLP and UEBA is there for. So connectivity is one thing, CASB, ZTNA, Secure Web Gateway, but data protection laying on top of the connectivity and using technologies like DLP, DRM, and UEBA, that's really what we buy these technologies for.
Okay. Jim, take us out by talking about where Zero Trust fits into the secure service edge equation.
Yeah, so the Zero Trust concept really comes from the fact that we've changed the model from the older data center model. I like to refer to it as the castle and the moat model, right? We had a data center that was surrounded, which was the castle, that was surrounded by a moat. And the only way to get in and out of the data center was over the drawbridge, if you would. And sitting at the drawbridge was a sentry who was blocking those who weren't supposed to be coming in and out, effectively, right? That sentry was the traditional firewall, right? So that was our security model of the past. Then we moved all the applications and all the data out of the castle, up into the open internet, up into the cloud, and we broke the traditional security model, right? The sentry no longer was seeing this data passing in and out, so we could no longer control it. We had to go to a different security model. That's where Zero Trust comes in. You only get access to applications and data if you can authenticate as a trusted user who is supposed to have the privilege of accessing certain applications and certain data. The Zero Trust model basically came along with, and it was a requirement of, the move to the cloud.
Jim, great perspectives on edge security and consolidated functions to improve the risk posture. Thanks for joining us today on Dark Reading News Desk.
Thank you for having me.
We've been talking with Jim Dolce of Lookout. This has been Terry Sweeney for Dark Reading. Thanks for joining us for this Dark Reading News Desk segment. We'll see you next time.